In spots, wind gusting up to 50 miles per hour, and there are electrical outages in several states. Travelers across America are feeling the effects of this. More than 5,000 flights canceled. The latest details ahead.
Fox News alert, Republicans pushing back after the Congressional Budget Office says the GOP's health care plan could add tens of millions more to the ranks of the uninsured over the next decade. But Speaker Paul Ryan sees vindication while Democrats sound the alarm. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith. Here today, Harris Faulkner, Meghan McCain, host of Kennedy on Fox Business Kennedy, and today's #1 lucky guy, also from FBN, co-host of After the Bell and host of Forbes on Fox, David Asman, is here, and he is outnumbered.
Thank you, ladies.
And we made it. We all made it.
Yeah, I could walk here, frankly. I live in Manhattan, so.
There you go. All right. I put on the boots and ran through the snow.
Yeah.
Good.
You're used to it. Chicago,
yes,
for goodness
sir.
sakes.
All right. Well, we hope everybody's staying safe out there. Let's get started. It's not just the big winter blast putting the nation's capital on alert. Democrats quick to pounce on yesterday's report from the Congressional Budget Office, which says the GOP's plan to replace Obamacare could add 24 million Americans to the ranks of the uninsured over the next decade. The report also finds the plan will put a significant dent in the federal deficit. House Speaker Paul Ryan says he sees positives.
I think if you read this entire report, I'm pretty encouraged by it, and it actually exceeded my expectations. We're saying the government's not going to force people to buy something they don't want to buy. And if we end an Obamacare mandate that says you must buy this government one-size-fits-all plan, guess what? People aren't going to buy that. Once our reforms kick in, what the CBO is telling us is it's going to lower premiums. It will lower premiums 10%. It stabilizes the market.
But as you can imagine, much different reaction from congressional Democratic leaders Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer.
The story that the CBO told yesterday was so clear. Under the Affordable Care Act, the number of people without insurance was cut in half. Under the proposal of the Republicans, the number of people uninsured will not only grow to where it was before the Affordable Care Act, it will be more people uninsured.
We're here today because we see something that our Republican colleagues in the House can't see. Trump care is a wreck. And we all knew that before the Congressional Budget Office released its surprisingly scathing score.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel joins us live from the Hill. Hey, Mike.
Well, hi, Sandra. Good afternoon to you. The numbers that have a lot of folks concerned here are the projections in terms of people who would lose health care coverage. There are some points that those behind this Republican health care alternative are selling, and they like the idea that it would lower premiums over time by 10%, increasing choices for individuals and families, reducing the federal deficit by $337 billion, and lowering taxes by $883 billion, providing much-needed tax relief for middle-class families and small businesses. So the House Majority Leader is selling some of those aspects.
When you look at the CBO numbers, you should be encouraged that, yes, we're going to lower premiums and bring health care with more choice, more opportunity, and empower the individual to make that decision.
As for enrollment, the Congressional Budget Office projects some 14 million people would lose coverage next year under this Republican plan. The number would balloon to $24 million people rather, over the next decade. Some House conservatives are now pushing for making changes.
We are working on that. It would help if we were able to amend it and change it. This idea that this bill was rolled out 6 days ago, went through committee, no amendments were allowed to happen, that's not a fair process. So let's have a fair process where we can make the changes that will accomplish what I just described. Unite Republicans, actually repeal Obamacare, and bring down the cost for working class families.
Speaker Paul Ryan has talked about the reason why there would be a reduction perhaps in some of the enrollment is because the government would no longer be forcing people to buy health care coverage. We asked Virginia Democrat Senator Tim Kaine about that aspect.
I don't get that argument, so we shouldn't care about it. You know, I don't think a nation that had 45 million uninsured people was a good thing either for our economy or for our healthcare system.
Meetings continue here on Capitol Hill and up at the White House between administration officials and top lawmakers trying to tackle this very difficult issue. Sandra?
All right, Mike Emanuel, thanks for going through all that for us. David, you just said, wow, he hit on everything.
He did. He got it all. He got it from the Democratic side to the conservative Republicans. By the way, this is the 2010 report from the CBO that mentions that 24 million people are going to be covered in Obamacare exchanges. Of course, it's only 10.5 million. So the CBO it is true, CBO has a history of getting these projections wrong because it's all based on numbers, not based on what individual human beings do when various incentives come in. But I got to say something about Paul Ryan. He's a decent guy. He's trying to do the responsible thing by stopping the bleeding of Obamacare. Obamacare is in a death spiral. All the experts know that it's in a death spiral. He's trying to do the decent thing, but when you try to stop the bleeding, your hands get bloody. And that's what's going to happen to Republicans because it hasn't completely collapsed yet. I'm talking about Obamacare. And so what President Trump said the other day was true. People can kind of look back on it with nostalgia even now and say, gee, maybe it wasn't so bad. Some people are saying that what Republicans should do is get all three phases. Remember, Ryan said there's going to be 3 phases. Bring them all up to Congress right now. Of course, they couldn't get 60 votes in the Senate because Democrats are against it.
That is what we've heard from him.
But focus on it and let the failure of Obamacare fall on Democratic hands. The public would see. Now, that's not a responsible thing as far as Paul Ryan's concerned, and I can understand why he'd say that. But on the other hand, if they try to stem the bleeding, they're going to end up with blood in their hands, and that's not going to be good for the Republicans. But for the time being,
not only did he say that this report exceeded his expectations, Megan, he said he was encouraged by it.
I like Paul Ryan. I've said that many times on the couch. I really do. I think he has a very tough job, especially in this specific political environment. I'm saying this with deep concern. Don't say things like that. For real. To sort of underestimate the fact that this is a blow, I think is disingenuous. And I'm not saying you just laid out very perfectly that the CBO isn't exactly 100% right all the time, but to sort of completely dismiss this as being nothing, I think is disingenuous.
Well, and to say the CBO was in favor of his plan, which is not necessarily true. I mean, he seemed to be trying to use the CBO to defend his plan.
People need to make this very simple. Our leaders need to quell the anxieties of so many people. I was trying to explain this to a friend of mine who knows very little about politics yesterday, and it's kind of like when you're in a bad relationship, but you're scared to be single again because you don't know what's out there. And I think with Obamacare, a lot of people understand that this has been a disaster, but Republicans aren't laying out a plan to replace collectively and concisely that are easing the anxieties.
And that is giving Democrats more ammunition. Go ahead.
Absolutely. No, then there are 2 things that I want to address because you're absolutely right. This is still Obamacare because we're still talking in terms of exchanges and mandates and tax credits, which were created under this immoral entitlement. So when Nancy Pelosi mounts her high horse and she talks about the immorality of this Republican bill, this is a response to Obamacare, which should have never taken place at all. You know, the Democrats had several options on the table what they could do with a stacked Congress and a Democratic president, and they chose this. They rammed it through. It was destined to fail. It was designed to fail so it would turn into single payer.
That's it.
And, you know, and to David's analogy, what's happened now is Republicans are forced, and I don't think this is a great plan, but now they have to use a tourniquet. And so the patient is losing a leg, and the Democrats are complaining because now he can't wear pants.
And timing is going to be everything, Harris.
Well, timing, I mean, you've got people who we're approaching the halfway mark now. By the time Easter passes and they maybe get something on the president's desk, now you will have gone 5 months or so. By the time you wake up, you've lost some time with all of this, well beyond the enrollment period. You're talking tax credits even for people who don't need them in this bill. You haven't solved the problem with Medicaid. We know that 19 states chose not to extend their Medicaid benefits, so we already had millions of people who were falling by the wayside because they couldn't get anybody to take Obamacare. They couldn't, you know, they couldn't get insurance still. This doesn't really hit those issues. But, you know, go back to what Megan just said. All of this comes back to those people that the president had at the White House yesterday. You know, like real people, like people who are suffering because they may have cancer and they actually need health care and they don't really want you to mess with it too much because something is better than nothing for them. You know, I hope he heard the kinds of things that get him back to the language of the things that he really wanted in this bill. I don't know if pizza and bowling can get President Trump's ideas back in the bill. I wonder what will, because he had some strong ones. he looked at those pre-existing conditions and said, keep them. He looked at, the ages of people who were covered and the need for Medicaid. Remember, he said he wasn't going to touch that. So how do you get back to what got this man elected with all those people on the Hill? Is it bowling and pizza?
He has said a couple of times in the past couple of days that maybe this idea of having Obamacare just fall flat in its face would be the best way to deal with it.
He said that yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, the White House is reportedly courting conservatives to get more support for the Obamacare repeal effort. According to The Hill, several conservative lawmakers from both the House and Senate are scheduled to visit the White House today to talk health care. Politico reports the White House is promising flexibility and that the strategist Stephen Bannon spoke privately with Freedom Caucus leader Mark Meadows recently. The caucus is opposed to the current bill, but fellow member Dave Bratt says they're open to negotiation. He tells Politico, quote, Trump ran on this competition across state lines, bringing the price down, and so that is the huge piece that I think if we can get that in the bill, then I think we can make some progress and I think get a lot of people to yes. But some worry that making concessions to conservatives could hurt support among moderates. So I want to go to you first, Kennedy. Do you feel, you're a libertarian, do you feel sort of any kind of peace knowing that Steve Bannon is meeting with Freedom Caucus members?
I think that the conservative cost cutters should certainly stand their ground with this. And, there are a lot of important elements at play. And, one of the things, and I understand the idea of reconciliation and needing that 60-vote majority in the Senate. However, if you want to bring the cost down, which is the ultimate goal of the Republicans' insurance plan, you have to allow people to buy insurance across state lines. More people will buy insurance if they do that. One thing that the Democrats certainly are not talking about is why are there so many more uninsured people? That's because a large number of people are choosing not to buy insurance. Absolutely. And we're not discussing that. And David, there was this new survey that came out from Wells Fargo and Gallup showing this massive optimism, a 20-point increase from quarter to quarter to the beginning of this year. Small businesses, they know that cash is free. There are more jobs on the horizon. They're going to provide more insurance. People will be able to afford insurance.
And everybody says the Democrats are saying that this is just about tax cuts to the rich. Well, a lot of small businesses are incorporated not as corporations, but they have to take their profit as salary. So this is going to be a break for small businesses more than it is for rich people. But if I could just say one thing, Mick Mulvaney, who's the budget director right now, he was a member of the Freedom Caucus. He is one of those conservatives. So is David Schweikert, by the way, from your home state of Arizona. There are a number of people in the Freedom Caucus who make a very good case as to why something has to change with health care. Mulvaney's point is that there's a very big difference between health care and insurance. If you have insurance and you have a $12,000 deductible and you're in the middle class, you can't afford to get health care. So what good is coverage if you have a $12,000 deductible?
But Obamacare approval is still at an all-time high right now, and I think talking about the anxieties people have about Republicans possibly blowing this repeal, not just the replacement, excuse me. And right now, we talk about this at length on the couch. Democrats don't have any message. They're in complete disarray. Do you know what blowing Obamacare does? It gives them a message in the midterm elections. The Republicans made a ton of promises that they were so inept they couldn't get together.
I want to go back to two things. So this free market idea, again, I ask, you knew that the president ran on that. Why is that not in this bill? Why did that become a bowling negotiation point? That was a tentpole in this whole thing, to be able to take your insurance.
Absolutely
so make it potable. So that's one thing. The other is with small businesses, this would alleviate, according to what the bill shows, the 29-49 principle. They could hire more people and get beyond working them just 29 hours a week, work them real jobs so people don't have to have so many part-time jobs. Because if you go over 29, you have to give benefits.
That's right.
If you go over 49 employees and get to 50, you're not going to hire more people because you have to give benefits. So this would actually create more jobs if it could work.
All right, it's getting hot up here in this snowy day talking about this. All right, the Justice Department asking for more time to turn over possible evidence related to President Trump's wiretapping claim. Lawmakers are giving them an extension. But what does this mean for the probe? Plus, Senate Democrats are threatening a government shutdown if Republicans try to use a new spending bill to defund Planned Parenthood or pay for a border wall. Does this show just how emboldened the Democrats are now and who should shoulder the blame for a shutdown? And after the show, you can join our live chat by clicking the Overtime tab at foxnews.com/outnumbered or go to facebook.com/outnumberedfnc. And of course, you can tweet us. We'll see you there.
The Justice Department says it needs more time to gather any possible evidence related to President Trump's wiretapping claims. It's asking the chairman and ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Devin Nunes, and Adam Schiff, for an extension. The lawmakers wanted evidence turned over yesterday. That was the deadline. And now they're giving the DOJ until next Monday, when they're set to hold their first open hearing on Russia. A spokesperson says this: if the committee does not receive a response by then, the committee will ask for this information during the March 20 hearing and may resort to a compulsory process if our questions continue to go unanswered, end quote. Meanwhile, the White House press secretary Sean Spicer is trying to clarify Mr. Trump's original tweets, saying he did not mean wiretapping literally. Watch.
The president was very clear in his tweet that it was, wiretapping. That spans a whole host of surveillance types of options. The House and the Senate intelligence committees will now look into that and provide a report back. But I think that there has been numerous reports from a variety of outlets over the last couple months that seem to indicate that there has been different types of surveillance that occurred during the 2016 election.
So it's interesting. There were some of us who were reporting and wondering if the president meant electronic gathering and might broaden it. Wiretapping is actually very specific. It doesn't apply to anything else. But if his understanding did, does that give him room then to come up with evidence of some of this other electronic gathering, which we think would exist because of reports of a FISA actually existing?
What's most fun about this story is that there's so much intrigue. You get into the weeds of intel here and what it means and what it doesn't, what agencies could have been listening in and how there could have been a back channel that is.
Well, they were listening.
Your purpose of listening to the Russian ambassador was really to get the people in the Trump administration, all this sort of stuff. But the most fascinating theory of all came from Judge Andrew Napolitano. Right here, I believe he first announced it. He did it again today on Fox and Friends, that there is this super secret agency in Britain called, and I got to look, GCHQ, Government Communications Headquarters. It is the most secret of all intel agencies in Britain. And he got it from three sources that it was actually them, those people, who were the ones who were listening.
That would bring it outside the...
did, though, and that was one of the Snowden revelations, they went to a newspaper in Great Britain and forced them to destroy the electronic evidence they had with some of those files that
well, they don't have a First Amendment over there, so they can get away with a lot of other stuff that we can't.
Can you go back to this idea of Sean Spicer explaining that he didn't mean this literally? I mean, I had to just do it myself and bring back up the tweets from March 4th. The two times that day that he did tweet about my wires tapped in quotations. The tweet prior to that was wiretapping in quotations. Why else did he put that in quotations?
I think
clearly that those words don't need to be.
But that's basically what he was doing. Harris points out wiretapping is a very specific act.
So you agree that he didn't mean it literally?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell, and there are fans of the president who use a more figurative interpretation of some of the stuff he says on Twitter, and there are journalists who take what he says very literally. It created a firestorm because he used this term wiretapping. But my argument was some of the surveillance that various government agencies use just as egregious as what the president was claiming, and there's also not a denial. That's, to your point, that's what makes it so intriguing, because the CIA can't come out and say, no, absolutely,
well,
we
the
were
FBI
not, or
can't
the
either.
NSA or the FBI.
Because it's outside the purview of everybody. Megan, when you drill down on this, though, and you kind of look at who's listening to whom, we know that this happened in some regard because we know conversations between other heads of state that we shouldn't know the details of.
And there's a deep
because of leaks.
Distrust in the intelligence community because of that. A lot of people in the intelligence community seem to feel that they have a political purpose and they don't trust Donald Trump, and that's why they're going to leak all this incredibly secure information to the American public. Part of the problem I'm having right now is we're interpreting Sean Spicer's interpretation of Donald Trump's tweets. That's not what I'm paid to do. It shouldn't, quite frankly, be. It's ridiculous. I mean, we're interpreting the president's spokesperson and then the president's tweets on something that could be a larger scandal than Watergate.
Well, if
this did in fact happen, this is something that would have vast ramifications not only within our intelligence communities but within our national security as well.
But what's also interesting is the fact that he has not further commented on it. We have not seen any comments from the president or heard any on wiretapping since those March 4th.
He knows, though. I mean, but that's the difference. Is A, he can declassify anything, and B, he can call up any information information that he wants because he's the president of the United States.
There is a little bit of good news, which is that the House Intel Committee.
Maybe that's what he did, and that's why he's being silent.
Of all the institutions in Congress, and I know Congress is at the bottom of the barrel in terms of respect, but at least the House Intel Committee has a semblance of bipartisan cooperation. So there may, if there's any institution in Congress that can dig up some stuff on this, it might be the House Intel Committee.
Or, to play devil's advocate, it was just a really fascinating way for Donald Trump to take the media narrative away from Jeff Sessions and the entire accusing himself scandal, doing it in one tweet, and we're still talking about it a week and a half later.
But then you have the CIA revelations that come on the heels of that. You know?
I've got my perspective, you've got yours.
Ooh, no, the timing. Think about the timing.
Speaking of needing a shovel, ladies and gentlemen,
I'm not into the Edward Snowden.
That's not what I'm saying, Megan. I'm saying look at the timeline. Look when things came out.
Okay.
Snow day Stella.
All right. Let's go to this storm. The massive storm blanketing the East Coast. Boy, I tell you, some people are really getting hit right now. Up to 2 feet of snow in some parts. We won't even see all of this until the day is done because you got to get news crews up there. Thousands of people are without electricity, and it's triggering a travel nightmare for people who don't even live anywhere near here. What you need to know. And Obamacare has been the Democrats' Achilles heel in recent elections. Why they think they can flip the script in the upcoming midterms. But can they stay on message? Can they stay together? Where's Bernie? That's actually not part of the script. The potential pitfalls.
Democrats hoping to turn the tables on Obamacare for the 2018 midterm elections, exacting political revenge as Republicans try to repeal and replace. Democrats, according to Politico, believe Obamacare is such a potent issue, it can help them win back the House. And in the Senate, they think it could at least stem what are expected to be heavy losses, thanks to a Republican-leaning map, says leader of the Senate, Dems, Chuck Schumer. Quote, it was easy for Republicans to be critical of Obamacare when you thought it would stay in place. Now that the chance of repeal is real, people are much more worried. We are on offense and united. They are on defense and divided, the opposite of what people would have predicted a month or two ago. Speaking of Schumer, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and New Hampshire Senator Maggie Hassan joining a so-called Save My Care bus tour as it ends a 2-month cross-country trek in Washington today. Meantime, progressive groups getting in on the battle to save Obamacare, too. The Washington Post reporting, quote, the energy of the anti-Trump forces since January 20th has surprised even his most fervent opponents. The question is whether Democrats can turn activism into policy victories and success at the polls. Defeating the GOP proposal is shaping up as a defining test with significant implications for policy and politics alike. All right, so Democrats have high hopes here, clearly. Megan.
Yeah, first of all, I think that bus tour is gimmicky and stupid and ridiculous. Yes, I think that's completely wrong. The problem with Republicans right now is we've been running since 2010 on repealing and replacing Obamacare, and now we have a grand opportunity to do so. And if we screw this up, the Democratic ads write themselves. This will be a huge loss for President Trump. It will be very difficult for him to get reelected in 2020. And there's so much disarray within our party on this, specifically with people in the Freedom Caucus and people like Paul Ryan. I take hope in the sense that, we talked about Steve Bannon meeting with members of the Freedom Caucus, but there still seems to be a long way to go.
And then this MoveOn.org, these protests that they're calling for Thursday and Friday, demonstrators, they say, should bring props, crutches, stretchers, slings.
Right. Well, Move On, of course, is the tip of the spear. That's what the Democratic Party uses to say and do the most outrageous things. But the Democrats themselves, they have no alternative to what hasn't worked. If the Republicans were to get their act together, and that's still a question. I think eventually they might, but still, I don't know. But they could focus on the fact, we just had Joe Gerarmandi on. He's on After the Bell. And Melissa Francis did a great job of interviewing your cohort, Melissa. He was a former insurance commissioner for California. And she said, look, the bottom line with Obamacare is you guys have to use coercion to force people to do what's not in their economic interest, whether it's individuals getting insurance or whether it's insurance companies insuring people who they don't make any money insuring. So he said, absolutely. And that's why we have to raise premiums. And that's why we have to force insurance companies to stay in California. And that's why we have to raise taxes and raise premiums. I mean, they don't have an answer other than doing what Obamacare has failed to do.
But they have the divide on the side of Republicans working in their favor right now. Will they use this to their advantage, and will it help them?
Democrats, I don't know how much political capital Democrats really have, because I have a feeling, although it seems like Republicans are really sort of jumbled and agitated right now, I do have a feeling that the president is going to find a way to lock it up. I think the president will have more political cover if the AHCA fails. I think he'll force Paul Ryan to take the hit because he's unpopular enough with enough coalitions within the House, particularly with Republicans. And I think if the Democrats fail on this and the Republicans actually get a victory, it could spell trouble for them for years to come, beyond 2018, certainly.
So it's interesting because the president actually is in the best position. I'm going to think optimistically here. I think he's in the best position to loan out some capital. He can loan some to the Republicans and he can loan some to the Democrats, and he can have people over to the White House and he can go to the Hill. He can get this done per his vision because this is so much a part of what he ran on. The question is going to be, is anybody going to accept that gift? And what's it worth to them? Why can't they make it worth something to help out the American people?
You're thinking like Trump right now. I like that.
I'm thinking
You're
positively.
thinking making the deal.
And I think, I've read the book. I've read the books. And that's how you get the deal done. I think he is the only one in the room with enough political capital to spread it around so that everybody feels like they got something.
Interesting.
I do agree with that.
We're going to leave it there. And the man who is large and in charge when it comes to getting Republican House members behind the Obamacare replacement, House Speaker Paul Ryan joins Martha McCallum tonight on the first 100 days. So be sure to tune in for that. That's 7 o'clock Eastern Time right here on Fox News Channel. All right, well, the Trump administration now firing back as 7 states are looking to stop President Trump's revised travel ban after a federal judge halted the first one. The new order due to take effect Thursday. But will it survive? We debate.
Welcome back to the couch. The Justice Department laying out its defense of President Trump's revised travel ban for the very first time. This after 7 states signed on to legal challenges to try to stop it before it takes effect Thursday. The Justice Department arguing that economic burdens the ban may cause to states are, quote, speculative. Also, that the new order is narrower in scope and that it includes a list of people who might be exempt. All right, so, David, how does this travel ban differ from the very first, and is it enough to provide the administration with legal cover against these aggressive states who want to force it through the courts?
It's not different enough to satisfy the people that objected to it in the first place, like all of the attorneys general. Like, there's a guy in Washington, the state of Washington, Bob Ferguson, who said there's no difference at all from this particular order and the first order, et cetera. So the question is whether it differs enough for the Ninth Circuit Court. Now, I don't think it does, because the court was not adjudicating on the basis of what law Donald Trump was using for his executive order. They were making stuff up.
Yeah.
They were putting stuff in that law that doesn't exist. They were saying things like, there'd never been a terrorist arrested from one of the countries involved in this order. And that's not true. There have been dozens of cases of people from those countries been arrested. So I don't think I don't think there's going to be any change with the Ninth Circuit. I may be wrong. I hope I am, because I think their first decision was awful. But there it is.
I mean, here's one of the things that the states are objecting to is they're saying it's essentially a Muslim ban, but it's not necessarily or explicitly a Muslim ban.
So this was, again, the White House's opportunity to put this differently in terms of why, first of all, it was so urgent that we get this done. It was based on national security. And to also to tie in the need for this with things that actually are coming. Or people who are actually coming to the country. What we do see is, okay, so we're going to borrow the list from Barack Obama, but we're going to take off one of the countries because we have soldiers that are, people on the ground who are helping out our soldiers in Iraq. It didn't change the parameters of why the executive order was needed. And so I think that should have been part of it, just to help sell it.
All right, so Sandra, what do you do? I mean, so let's say there are more legal challenges. Let's say the Ninth Circuit, yeah, absolutely. And let's say that the Ninth Circuit decides to, on whichever legal grounds they choose, shut the whole thing down again. Does the White House, I mean, now they realize they can go back and craft a new EO from scratch. Do they do that, or is this the hill they die on? Is this the executive order that they try and take all the way through the court system to the highest court in the land?
Based on this EO being so similar to the first one, you have to assume this is exactly where they want to go. They tried to alter it to pass legal muster. But if you look at Hawaii, which was the first state to sue, they name it being essentially a Muslim ban as their primary problem with it. But they go on to talk about it hurting the ability of state businesses and universities to recruit top talent and damages the state's robust tourism industry. There are a lot of problems when you look at the states and why they are suing, why they're going up against this. Not just the primary reason that we always hear about them considering it a Muslim ban. They're worried about their economies.
Is this the first time tourism has been brought up? At least it's the first time I can remember hearing about it. It's interesting that would be such an implication. Obviously, Hawaii, big tourist destination for many people. The Muslim ban, travel ban, non-Muslim ban. What's fascinating, we talked about this yesterday with Judge Napolitano, is comments from the campaign trail still come back to haunt, this travel ban in court as well. It can be held against them because of intent.
Because it speaks to intent.
And I think that above all else is going to be the main battle.
But I don't think Syrians canceling their trip to Hawaii are going to hurt the Hawaiian economy. I just got to say that. I just got to put that out.
But David, to your point, I think that's something that they have to show. I think there has to be some numerical data showing exactly a cause and effect relationship between. I don't know.
Ninth Circuit will pick up anything to see what they want to see in that law.
Yeah, no. If that family of Syrians aren't spending $600 a night to stay at a lovely beachside hotel, I think that Hawaii might spill down the drain. All right, very good. So glad you're here. A major showdown looming on Capitol Hill. Senate Democrats firing the first shot, threatening a government shutdown, deja vu, over possible provisions in a federal spending package. The political battle has begun. Who will win, and what does that mean for the American people? Stay here.
All right, game on. Senate Democrats threatening a government shutdown over an upcoming spending package. They are warning Republicans that they simply will not stand for a few possible items in the measure. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying in a statement, quote, if Republicans insist on inserting poison pill riders such as defunding Planned Parenthood, building a border wall, or starting a deportation force, they will be shutting down the government and delivering a severe blow to our economy. David, I'm going to go to you first. I didn't like it when Republicans shut the government down originally. No. I don't like it now. I think it's childish, and there are also other ramifications. State parks are shut down. Right. People couldn't go to the Grand Canyon. I don't like any of this. I think it's not why we elected them.
And I'm going to do a shout out to that Planned Parenthood because there is something called the Hyde Amendment that is supposed to prevent taxpayers from paying for abortions. Well, guess what? Planned Parenthood has almost doubled the amount of abortions that they've done in the past 10 years at the same time that their money that they get from the government has almost doubled. So they are doing more abortions as part of their business, and they're getting more money from taxpayers, which to me means taxpayers are paying for the abortion business, and they're not supposed to, according to the Hyde Amendment. So there are legitimate reasons. This isn't just snipping and something. There are real reasons why Planned Parenthood in particular could be cut.
But back to shutting down the government. Yeah. What do you think happens?
I don't know. I mean, if it does happen, on whose shoulders it falls is a good question. It depends on how it's spinned, and frankly, the best spinners inside the Beltway are the Democrats, not the Republicans.
Interesting. It usually falls on the shoulder of the people who are not in power. Right? So it would fall on the Democrats, and if they can figure out how to spin it and shift it back.
I bet Schumer's already thought about that.
Well, we saw that with Obamacare, he's kind of on a tear for Dr. Seuss. You've got, the repeal is real, the divide inside. I mean, so Democrats are really challenged right now. They need to come up with some ideas.
They do.
Absolutely. No, and I agree with you. And like the Save Our Care gimmick-laden bus tour, it's the exact same thing. People don't like it. People don't want it. If Chuck Schumer is sitting in his office whiteboarding different ways to shut down the government and to thwart the process, he should be thinking how to get people jobs, how to encourage economic growth, and maybe listen to what some of the voters were asking in this very shocking turn of events in the November election.
And where is President Trump when he should be out there putting the finger on Democrats. I know he's probably saving some of that because he wants to deal with them in some way on the changes in Obamacare. But he should be out there saying, for example, what is your plan? Give us a plan that we can work with, and we'll talk about it. But there are none.
Maybe the scope of government does not include funding Planned Parenthood. I know that may seem like heresy in some circles, but I think there's a lot of government spending we can cut across the board, and maybe that's just not the function of government. Sorry to be a cold-hearted,
we're used to
liberty
that.
lover.
Just joking. Megan, but do you think that the president so far, and it's still early on in his term, has shown his willingness to reach across the aisle and work with Democrats like he had talked about on the campaign trail?
Yeah, I mean, he had a bowling event for people of the Freedom Caucus to come to the White House. I mean, I'm not a member of the Freedom Caucus, but I would have gone, and I sometimes disagree with the president. It's what gives me the most hope for President Trump right now, is I do think at his very core he is a deal maker, and he is smart enough, obviously, to understand the political ramifications if Obamacare doesn't go through. And as long as Chuck Schumer continues to just throw tantrums and go on gimmicky bus tours, I think he's going to be fine.
It's such a good question that you make, though. I mean, I know that the caucus, the Freedom Caucus right now, is oppositional on that one issue, but they are part of the same party. Will he actually, extend beyond the snowstorm? Because I know they've had some halting of bowling and pizza and whatnot until they can
that was
shovel
supposed
the
to be
snow.
tonight.
Maybe if they can get that other lane working.
If he can do that with Democrats, too, I go back to the optimism that I have about the fact that he actually could broker a deal. But everybody's got to come to the table with some chips.
You know what? To your point, every time someone who's been on the offensive against the president, every time they enter the White House, they emerge as though they've been huffing pleasant gas. and they say the most wonderful, loving things about the president. So I think he's smart to reach across the aisle and, instead of moving the blockade out of the way by force, he just charms the pants off.
And bowling goes very far with people. I always like that idea. All right, we're outnumbered in just a minute.
Hi. David Asman! Wow, what an hour.
I wonder if we could can some of the conversations we have during the off moments here. That'd be fun.
It would be awkward if we did.
Maybe.
Thank you, David
Thank you for
Asman.
allowing me to be here. Appreciate it.
Donning the snow boots and coming in to be with us today. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Happening now.